And I hope every one of you have submitted your quiz. All right. If you don't have anything to ask, then let us continue with the lecture. So we have been talking about different characteristics of the source rock and the type of processes the source rock actually takes to produce oil and gas. And we said that organic matter generally transforms into something called kerogen, and then that kerogen essentially gives rise to the formation of oil and gas. We broadly said there are two processes that is involved. So deoxygenization and then carbonization, by which the weight percentage of carbon actually increases and the weight percentage of oxygen actually decreases. And for hydrocarbon generally, the amount of hydrogen, the weight percentage of hydrogen remain constant. And we also talked about, we have compared the formation process of oil and gas with that of the coal. And we said that on the contrary, for coal, actually, you see the dehydrogenization process, that is the number of hydrogen do decrease while coalification happens, right? Okay, so if we look at oil and gas and try to understand its chemistry, which is nothing but the product of of chemical maturation of the kerogen. What we find, the petroleum and natural gas. So petroleum here refers to oil actually, and natural gas are mixtures of hydrocarbons, and nothing new in that. On an average, they consist of 85% of carbon, 13% of hydrogen, 2% of nitrogen, sulfur, and oxygen, all in weight percentage. The main components of natural hydrocarbons belong generally to three groups. Number one are paraffins, and you know they are also called N-alkanes. Okay? And with a general formula of CnH2n plus 2. For n equals to 1 to 4, these are gases. Okay, so 1 means CH4, that is methane, ethane, propane, and butane. They are natural gases. So 1 to 4. And then from 5 to 15 are liquids. Liquids means they will belong to your oil group. So 1 to 4 is the gas group, and then the heavier hydrocarbons, the heavier paraffins. If the value of N is more than 4, up to 15, we will put them in the oil range. Okay? And then above that are solid hydrocarbons. So the first group is paraffin, and then we have, and that is the dominant group. And then we have naphthenes, okay? And the general formula of naphthene is CnH2n. They form saturated ring compounds in which N is equals to 5, 6, or 7. Cyclopentane and cyclohexane are common components of crude oil. Okay? The oil which is something which is crude oil is the oil is what is essentially comes out of the ground, and then it goes
Hello,
yes,
sir. Are you presenting the slides?
yeah, are you not
Hello.
able to see them?
Yes, sir.
You can't see them?
No, sir.
That's strange because I'm sharing the screen.
Oh.
Uh, none of you can see the slides, or is it only you? Can anyone confirm?
It is visible to us.
Okay, so there must be something wrong. I don't know who could not see the slides.
Me, Jitendra.
Yeah, then there must be something problem with your end, Jitendra. Why don't you
Okay,
see whether you can pin the presentation? Then
okay.
perhaps you will be able to see it.
Let me check, sir.
Yeah. Rest of you can see, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so the second group, as we were discussing, are naphthalene. Okay, and then cyclopentane and cyclohexane are two common components of crude oils, and crude oils are the oils which essentially that comes out of directly from the ground, and then you have to take it through certain refining process, and you know about oil refineries. I'm sure you heard of them. Yeah, like one of the biggest refineries that we have in India is in Hajira. Reliance have a lot of oil refineries in India. Okay, so and chemical engineers do get a lot of jobs in oil refineries. I'm sure. So the cyclopentane and cyclohexane are present in that belongs to the naphthalene group. Uh, is are common constituents of crude oil, often in methyl form, methyl form. Okay, uh, together 2% or more of an average in crude oil. Okay, so it's the total naphthalene percentage is around 2%, and then we have aromatics, generally minor group of hydrocarbons that contains at least one benzene ring, and you know the chemical formula of benzene ring C6H6, in which all carbons share the fourth bond. They are called unsaturated because they will react to add hydrogen or other elements to their ring, right? So you have read about organic geochemistry, how in a benzene ring one of the bonds can be shared with any other elements. Okay? It can be anything or any other hydrocarbon chain. So you can find also some aromatics in the crude oil, but it's dominantly paraffins with around 2 to 3% of naphthenes, and then very minute amount of aromatics. Okay, so that is what is your general composition of oil and gas chemistry wise. Okay, so you don't have to submit this assignment to me, but I will recommend that you do it by yourself, because some of the questions, I mean, the answers are very much included for your syllabus. At least some of them. For example, I mean, what organic biomolecules did you have your breakfast in? I mean, did you were in your breakfast today? Okay, I mean, you don't have to. This will not come in your in your exam. That's for sure. But then you can actually compare of the food that you eat today, right? Okay, and that of something forms the total organic matter, right? What is the principal difference between your metabolism and that of plants? Something interesting to find out. Why is the open ocean is less favorable for phytoplankton growth than shelf areas? Okay, this is one of the questions you must try to answer. Okay, why is the open ocean less favorable for phytoplankton growth than shelf areas? What is different? Then this is another interesting question, the answer to which you must find out. What happens to carbon cycle if all the ice caps melt? Okay, so that is another interesting question that you should find out the answers to. Write down the basic chemical formulas of the formation of sugar through photosynthesis. I think this one is very simple. You all have read it in your high school biology. And then burning of simple lipid, okay? And then transformation of carbonates at high temperature. And this is where you have clues for dolomitization as well. Okay, so these are some relevant, interesting questions that I would like you to actually find the answers out. Yeah, some of the Some of the questions are very relevant to the course as well. So, but you don't have to submit them. You can do a self-study and discuss later on with me if you wish to. Okay. All right. So now let us go to another important topic. So we have talked about the source rock, and we have talked about the basic chemistry of oil and gas. Now we are going to look at another very important topic, which we call migration from source to reservoir. And we talked about it that oil and gas fundamentally has lower specific gravity than water. Hence, they will not be able to stay where they actually develop or where they actually form, which is close to the source rock. They will actually migrate upward. Okay? They will migrate upward unless it actually finds a trap and it traps within a reservoir. Otherwise, it will leak out, right? And such a picture is given here, as you can see. For example, maybe here was my source rock, and through this fracture, you can see by the look of it, this is a fault system because the layers on the either side of this black line has been displaced. So this is a fault, and through that fault, this black stuff, which is perhaps hydrocarbon, has moved up, okay? And then it has found some branched fractures, and then in these oil ponds, or they have kind of deposited. So such ponds are generally you can find at many places in nature. Okay, so you find a little bit of a pond in which you have some hydrocarbon, some oily stuff present. Okay, in the form of more or less like crude oil. Okay, and this sort of phenomena is called seepage, hydrocarbon seepage, or hydrocarbon leaked zones. Okay, hydrocarbon seepage is more of a technical term that hydrocarbon has seeped through this fracture system and has been deposited in such ponds. Okay, there is this very famous example of La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, and people do go to see this one. Okay, what you find here is a pond like this. Okay, and you find there a lot of fossilized mammals, fossilized mammoths. Okay, so what it means that this has been there for a long time, and these poor mammoths, once upon a time in their life, maybe got into it and never could come out and died, and then their remains are found there as fossils. Yeah, say it's a fascinating natural place to visit. Yeah, so it number one provides you a clue that hydrocarbon does come out and form such bonds. And the unfortunate fate of these animals. Okay, which is in prehistoric time tried to perhaps thought that this is water or something, got into it, but because of the heavy oil could not ever come out and died there. And you can read about this place La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles in the internet. Yeah, so it's like a touristic place. Okay, so what is the general consideration for migration? So oil and gas migration are the least understood processes. Okay, we will soon find out that although it sounds very intuitive that oil or gas being very lighter than water, it's easier for it to actually move up. But you will see the actual physics is rather complicated to understand. Okay. So oil and gas migration at least are the least understood processes in the formation of hydrocarbon reservoirs. Much of the current thinking of how it happens is hypothetical and difficult to prove with either experiment or theory. So the models on migration, especially on primary migration, that we are going to discuss, okay, will be mostly hypothetical and will not perhaps carry a lot of experiments or theories around it. When potential source and reservoir rocks are buried, they contain water in their pore space. You know about it, okay? Oil or gas, therefore, has to replace this water in the migration process when it reaches the reservoir rock. And I have emphasized this point again and again. Of course, the upper crust is filled with water, and that water is called brine. Yeah, we talked about it, that it is mostly saturated with salt. So oil or gas, whatever is being expelled at the source rock, must replace that water to reach the reservoir and be there, right? So you can see here one pretty nice example of how from the US Gulf Coast, okay, how water salinity varies with depth. You can see this is concentration of dissolved salt, and then this is depth below surface in kilometers. And there is a very linear relationship, as you can see. So you can think that the water is going to be more saline as we go deeper. Okay, the water is going to be more saline as we go deeper. Now, what are the evidences of migration? So one of the evidences that we just said in the title slide, that you see such oil seepages, the example of the oil lake that I described. Okay. So the most compelling reason comes from the way oil and gas accumulate, right? They are typically found in porous and permeable rocks that are arched upwards and that are topped by an impermeable layer or seal. Okay, so the rocks that are arched upwards means they are typically found in a trap, right? And the traps, be it an anticline, be it a fault trap that we have described, are arched upward. Okay, so if this hydrocarbon accumulation would have been due to gravity, I mean, due to the positive effect of gravity, then we would have found them at something which is arched downward, right? So as it is found in structures which are arched upward, what we can think that this was perhaps been migrating from bottom to the top, okay, and has been stopped by the seal or the cap rock, right? The second reason is the relationship between source rock and reservoir rock. Okay, what you find generally that the source rock is generally older and sits at a structurally lower position than the reservoir rock, or the reservoir rock is usually younger and or structurally higher than the source rock. Okay, so that means the source rock, the oil and gas forms in the source rock, and then it migrates to the reservoir rock through uh, anti-gravity migration, right? Visual evidence of migration is provided by oil and gas seepages that we have just discussed, right? These are some nice oil and gas seepages seen from the satellite, right? So this is Santa Monica Bay, an example from Santa Monica Bay, and this is an example from Azerbaijan. Okay, you can actually find such oil seepage um, on the top surface of the ground from satellite images. But not all the reservoirs need migration. We will see. We talked about them. The unconventional reservoirs will not need migration. We will see when we discuss about unconventionals in few days. You will see that migration will not be a necessary mechanism to play in case of unconventional reservoir, both in case of shale gas, shale oil, as well as coal bed methane. Okay. In those cases, and one of such unconventional field is say Atal field in Oman, where the source itself essentially acts as the reservoir, and hence you will perhaps not need the theory of migration to invoke. Okay. So generally migration is of two types. One we call as primary migration, and the other one is called secondary migration. So primary migration is mature hydrocarbons first have to migrate out of the source rock, and this is what we call primary migration. That means the hydrocarbon is formed in the source rock and then it simply expels out of the source rock. That process is called primary migration. And then after it expels out, when it travels the path, through faults and fracture and reaches to the reaches to the reservoir rock, that part is called secondary migration. Okay, so if I just so just try to draw it for you. So as I have been saying, that suppose my apologies. Why did it stop? Give me one moment. All right. So as I have been saying, that perhaps this is your shell, right? This is your source rock, and then it has to migrate to the reservoir rock, right? Which is my sandstone, perhaps. And then it must be topped by the trap and the cap rock. The cap rock or the seal, which is of course again shell, as I have said. Now, okay, so the hydrocarbon initially will form here in the source rock itself, right? In its pore and permeable space, and then it will expel out of the source rock, right? So this process of simply expelling out of the hydrocarbon from the source rock, this is what we call as, this is my primary migration. Okay, this is primary migration. Now of course then it will find out its way to reach the reservoir. Okay, find its way to reach the reservoir. And this part is my secondary migration. Now, what you will soon observe and you will understand that secondary migration, although this is the larger path traveled by oil and gas, is rather easy to explain. Okay, but this primary migration is very difficult to understand. Okay, so it's mostly hypothesis based. Hypothesis based. So, which is the very tiny part of the story where essentially hydrocarbon just expels out of the source rock. So, what are the mechanisms of doing it? Okay. So, this is in general a fine grained rock that has low permeability, of course, right? So, the shell that we are talking about is a very fine grained rock with very low permeability. During burial, this rock gets compacted. Shells are the rocks which are compacted most, okay? And its interstitial fluid becomes overpressured. Hence, often you find that the pore pressure, the pressure of the fluid, whatever in the pore spaces of shell, is extremely overpressured. So, what do I mean by overpressure? My third year and fourth year students know about it, but still, sorry, my fourth year and fifth year students know about this, but for third year students, what is overpressure? Overpressure means what we observe that the fluid, so this is fluid pressure that I have drawn against depth, generally has a trend, okay, with depth. So this is my surface of the earth. Okay, from the surface of the earth, as we move down, there is certain gradient with which the fluid pressure increases. Okay, which we generally find at around 1.15 bar per 10 meter. Okay, this is my normal hydrostatic gradient. Okay, and overpressure means that we see that in most of the shells, actually, when it finds a shelly rock, generally the pressure actually is few bars higher. Okay, and this is what we call as overpressure. Okay? Because rapid burial. So number one, because of rapid burial, whatever water is present in this pore space cannot escape. Okay, water in pore space in a shell cannot equilibrate. Okay, equilibrate. Hence, the pressure is actually jump. There is a little bit of jump in the pressure, and this is what we call as overpressure. Now, overpressure can be 20 bar, 50 bar, 100 bar, who knows? Okay. But moral of the story: this the shell that you find is generally overpressured with respect to the surrounding rocks. Which have higher permeabilities and form from which fluids can migrate to greater ease upward. Okay, it's easier to equilibrate. Therefore, a fluid pressure gradient develops between source rock and the surrounding. Okay, so now if this is essentially again my source rock, okay, if this is my source rock, then this source rock will of course be at an elevated pressure, right? So if this is P1 and its surrounding, which is more porous and permeable P2. Okay, so P1 will be greater than P2, right? There will be a pressure gradient. Okay, this causes the fluids, the water.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
sir. Sir, could you explain the diagram again after the rapid burial thing?
okay,
Like in the diagram after the rapid burial, I'm not able to understand.
okay. So what happens when there is rapid burial of the shell? Okay, rapid burial means the rate of burial is very high. Okay, it gets buried very fast. Okay, and because of its very fine grain size, what happens? Whatever water inside the pore spaces, it cannot equilibrate with the surrounding. Okay, it cannot escape the pore space and it cannot equilibrate with the surrounding. So more water is actually trapped inside the pore space. Okay, and hence what we observe that there is an elevated pressure in such shells, which we call overpressure. Okay, and hence if I find a pressure that I measure in a shell is P1, the pressure of the fluid is P1, and its surrounding is P2, we will observe that P1 is greater than P2. Is that clear now?
Yes, sir. Sir, but the burial process take million of years. Like it is a very slow process. How it could be
Yeah,
rapid then?
it is a very slow process, so, but whereas the burials can also be rapid. Rapid means, I mean, it will still be in the say for example, the sandstone takes of 50 million years, or I'm exaggerating, maybe 2 million years. The shell may takes 500,000 years or something like that. Okay, so burial means rapid burial means it's so there is one concept of isostasy, and we will read about it when we in your solid earth geophysics class. You will see that the rate of burial actually can increase and decrease due to isostasy, can increase on and decrease due to the rate of sedimentation as well. So if the sedimentation, the overlying sediments are depositing very rapidly, then you will also find the burial being very rapid as well. Okay. This also depends on the rate of subsidence. If the subsidence is very quick, I mean, and that will depend on the isostasy. If the subsidence is very quick, then you will also find rapid burial. Okay. Anything else?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Was that clear or not? Was it clear for you, or shall I explain it once more? Hello.
It was clear, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
it was clear. Good. Okay, so therefore a fluid gradient develops between source rock and the surroundings, more permeable rocks, right? This causes the fluids, water and hydrocarbon to migrate along the pressure gradient. Okay, so of course, then if there is a pressure gradient, the hydrocarbon or water, whatever it is, will have a tendency to migrate from P1 to P2, right? Usually upwards. Although downward migration is possible, okay, but you for this time for the timing you don't have to worry about it while we are talking about the concept of migration. Maybe we will discuss downward migration later on, but this is a very special case. Okay, for the timing you don't have to be worried about. For the timing, you just remember that there is a pressure difference, and due to there is, and also there is a, uh difference in hydrostatic. Sorry, in your specific gravity. Hence, the hydrocarbon will move up. And this process is called primary migration, and it takes place across stratification. Across stratification means this is a shell layer, this is a shell layer, this is shell, and this is sandstone, right? So this actually is crossing the strata boundaries, right? Now the question is why? Why would it cross? Okay. Now, before we further dive into that question, yeah, what we also see that porosity, sorry, can see porosity decreases with compaction. Okay. And more compaction means greater depth, right? So you can see here porosity, and here is here is depth. In the x-axis I have depth, and in the y-axis I have porosity, right? You can see at around 500-meter depth I have almost like 30% porosity, and at 4,500-meter depth I can see that the porosity decreases with and becomes almost like 5%, right? And also the bulk density of the rock increases. So the bulk density of the rock increases means that it is getting more compacted, right? It's getting way more compacted. If the bulk density of the bulk density increasing means it's getting compacted, right? So what does that mean? Suppose I have a rock which is loosely compacted, and if I calculate the density of this one, this will be lower than something which is heavily compacted, of course. So with depth, compaction increases. So the increase in bulk density with depth, yeah, that refers to the increase in compaction. And then also you see with increase in compaction, I have decrease in porosity, right? Now, what is the major controversy around the primary migration theory? Okay. What is the major controversy? So if we put the principal requirements of oil generation and migration together, we end up in a substantial dilemma. Okay. And what is the dilemma? So oil is generated at temperature of 60 to 120 degrees centigrade, which are typically found at depths 2 to 4 kilometers. Okay. Now, if we go back to the earlier slide, let us see at the depth of 2 to 4 kilometers. Okay. So this is 2 to 4 means around this range, right? Around this range. To 4 kilometers. And let us see what sort of porosity will the rock contain. So this is the range of porosity that rock will contain, right? The source rock at these depths are so compacted that their permeability is too low for efficient primary migration. Although there is some porosity, you can see here what we have seen. It's around how much? It's around maybe 8 to 15% of porosity. Yeah, that's what is translated from this general graph. Although this is a very general graph, it can vary from place to place. Although there is some porosity left, around 10 to 15%, but we are observing that the permeability will decrease substantially, and it will be too low for any efficient primary migration. Okay. So the permeability at that depth will be too low for any hydrocarbon to expel out of the shell. So this dilemma is not solved yet. How in such a low permeable rock we can see the hydrocarbon to come out? But many ideas have been proposed, and which we will discuss right now. At the core of the problem is the question of how hydrocarbons migrate. Okay. So these are the different theories that people have proposed. The first one is migration by diffusion. Okay. Because of differentiating concentration of the fluid in the source rock and in the surrounding rock, there is a tendency to diffuse. A widely accepted theory, this one. Okay, so this is it's not exactly migration through interconnected pore spaces like physical migration, but it's more like diffusion. Okay, migration by molecular solution in water. While aromatics are most soluble in aqueous solutions, they are rare in oil accumulations. Therefore, discrediting the general importance of this mechanism, although it may be locally important. Okay, so this, I mean, people have also suggested migration by molecular solution in water, but then this is not a widely accepted theory. Migration along microfractures in the source rock, and this is, I think, one of the most important hypotheses which people have come out recently, and which seems to be a very logical conclusion. During the compaction of the fluid pressure, the source rock may become large and spontaneous hydrofracturing occurs. A useful underestimated hypothesis. Okay, so what does that mean? That we said yes, the permeability of the rock is less. We said yes, that the permeability of the rock itself is less. So it's difficult to actually migrate fluid through it. Difficult to its, original permeability. But then, because of this high fluid pressure, what can happen, that there could be the formation of small micro cracks. Due to hydrofracturing. Hydrofracturing means because, as you know, we have already talked about it, that the pressure is elevated here. Because of the elevated pressure, there could be the formation of some smaller cracks, okay, which we call as micro cracks. These micro cracks, remember, they are self-healing, okay. So that means the micro cracks form, it expels the hydrocarbon out, and then it heals by itself, okay. They will not stay there forever, okay. They're self-healing micro cracks, okay. So that is a useful hypothesis people have proposed, saying that although the primary permeability or the matrix permeability is low, so matrix permeability is low, but is compensated by my permeability due to microfractures. Okay, this is compensated by microfractures. Compensated by. And then the last hypothesis is called oil phase migration. Organic matter in the source rock provides a continuous oil weight migration path along the hydrocarbon, and along the hydrocarbons diffuse along pressure concentration gradient. This is a reasonable but unproved hypothesis, good for high TOCs. Now, this is something I wish to explain. Let me see if I go to the next slide, and I have more space here, so I will explain it here. Okay. You remember we talked about the residual hydrocarbons. So what happens, say for example, we are looking at this shell and then say we are magnifying this, okay? We are magnifying this. And then what we will observe that perhaps these are my individual grains. Okay. These are my individual grains. And then we said this is oil weight. That means there are some, there is oil which is in these spaces. Okay. And this is like due to the surface tension, there is a capillary pressure which is built up. Okay. There's a capillary pressure which is built up. And due to that capillary pressure, essentially, and because of the presence of P1 and P2, because of the presence of the pressure difference, this hydrocarbon can actually migrate up. Okay, it's something like, so you have like a pool of fluid, and then if you immerse a capillary rod into it, you will see that the fluid can actually migrate up to a certain height, which is above this level, right? Can migrate up to a certain height, and that essentially is proposed that such uh, like a capillary action takes place because of this oil weight pore spaces. Although the actual permeability is extremely low, so the Darcy's law do not actually occur. I mean, is too low for Darcy's law. But then because of the capillary action, the hydrocarbon can migrate. Okay. But this process is good in theory, but is hard to prove as well. Okay. But this process, the process 3, process 3 and process 4, yeah, process 3 and process 4 seems to be the most accepted theories. Okay. Secondary migration. So secondary migration is the process in which hydrocarbon move along a porous and permeable layer and it to its final accumulation called secondary migration. Okay. So it's the rest of the process. So primary migration is just coming out of the hydrocarbon from that shell layer, and then it finds its pathway to move up to the reservoir. And this happens because of the buoyancy force. We talked about it. These forces are proportional to the density difference between hydrocarbon and water. For continuous but physically separate hydrocarbon and water columns, the hydraulic potential or the difference between the products of density times the height of the two phases governs the fluid flow. Okay, you know about it. It's for continuous but physically separate hydrocarbon and water column, the hydraulic potential. Okay. So the potential difference must be there for the hydrocarbon to move up, or the difference between the products of density times the height of the two phases governs the fluids flow of the fluid. The principal conduits for secondary migration are permeable sandstone beds, unconformities, faults, and fractures. Some nice pictures are given here. Okay. You can see here through this sandstone itself, there is migration of the hydrocarbon. Okay. And it moves from the bottom to the top. Okay. And then, of course, the hydrocarbon in this reservoir, the hydrocarbon is kind of filled up by the process of secondary migration. And you can see here there is a small anticlinal trap being developed because of the presence of this reef, carbonate reef, and the pathways of secondary migration. You can see here pathways of secondary migration. Okay, and because of this unconformity, the presence of this unconformity, hydrocarbon is stopped here. So you can actually virtually drill a well here, and drill a well here, or you can drill a well here, take your hydrocarbon out. So suppose here was my source rock. Through primary migration, it came here, and then through secondary migration, moving up and being stopped by this. Vertical migration is stopped by the cap rock. So this is my cap rock. And its lateral migration is stopped by this trap. And hence you can take out your hydrocarbon from here. So this is primary migration, this part, and this is secondary migration, right? Now, this is a very interesting story that I'm going to share with you. Okay? So what usually happened in earlier days, usually happened in the earlier days while people were trying to explore an area, okay, where people were trying to explore an area. Suppose this is a basin where people are trying to find out hydrocarbon, okay, and they would have gone to the highest spot. Okay, they would have gone to the highest spot there. Okay, and they would have drilled a well. If they would have got hydrocarbon here, they would have said that this basin has potential for further exploration. So the idea was that, because hydrocarbon moves upward, that it is most likely that I will find the maximum probability of finding hydrocarbon will be at a place which has maximum elevation. Okay? Which has maximum elevation. But if they would have not found hydrocarbon here in this place of maximum elevation, they would have abandoned the basin. They would have said that no, if we are not finding it at the top, then it doesn't mean it's nowhere. It means that it is nowhere. So let's just abandon this basin and let's just go away. Okay. So that was the exploration strategy in very early days while people were trying to find oil and gas. In late 60s and 70s, geologists were trying to explore North Sea, okay, in Europe. And what they did, so they found a structure like this, okay, they found a structure like this, and then what they did, they drilled at the top structure. They drilled at the top structure, and then they found no hydrocarbon. And then they said, perhaps there is no hydrocarbon in this basin. Let's go get out. Okay. Now, a second set of geologists actually came, and then they started thinking of it in a more scientific way. Okay. So you can imagine here I have a set of anticlines and synclines, and this anticline, which is my topmost anticline. And then say, for example, I have my source rock somewhere here. And then hydrocarbon is going from here to here through secondary migration. So what will happen? It will first find the lowermost trap and it will fill it up to the spill point, which we have discussed before. Then what will happen? If I have more hydrocarbon, it will start filling it, fill this one up, till this spill point, and then this will fill this one up till its spill point, and then this will fill this one up, right? So that is what is being shown here. So this fills first this trap, then this trap, then this trap partially, and then fully this trap. Now there could have been two things, that once they are all filled up, that the source rock is running out of hydrocarbon, so it cannot reach here. Okay, it cannot reach here, and there is no hydrocarbon here. Okay, that is one thing. The other thing can happen, that is that perhaps there are fracturing here, and even if there would have been hydrocarbon, okay, there would have been hydrocarbon that could have leaked away. And you drilled a well here and you have found no hydrocarbon. Okay, but then that doesn't mean that the traps which are present in a stratigraphically lower level, they do not have hydrocarbon. Okay, that doesn't mean. So with this concept, one geologist actually was gutsy and tried drilling these other traps. Okay, and that is the start of the huge fields that you observe today in North Sea. Okay, and the first that they actually discovered is called Brent. Yeah, and you know, one of the crude oil is named after this particular field. We called Brent crude oil. So if you today go to and write oil price, okay, you will find there are two types of crude oils. Crude oil price. There are two types of crude oils are reported. One is called WTI, and the other one is called Brent. Okay, and this is after the name of Brent, of this particular reservoir, Brent. Okay, and the story of the discovery of Brent reservoir was like this, you know, while the understanding of secondary migration was put into place, and people could actually get rid of this older idea of the concept that only the topmost trap will have hydrocarbon. Okay, but that's not the case. Okay. Okay, and then of course we talked about seals before, and I am not. So secondary migration proceeds until the impermeable barrier encountered to prevent further flow. The most common seal is shell layer, as we have discussed before. The most effective seals are evaporites. Evaporites are extremely low porosity and low permeability rocks, so they can act as very good seals. Salt, anhydrite, because they have intrinsically low permeability. Okay. So conclusions on migration, we can distinguish between primary and secondary migration. While primary migration is slow and proceeds over short distances, secondary migration is faster and proceed over very long distances, more than hundreds of kilometers. There are several theories for primary migration, among which diffusion, oil phase migration, microfracturing, and migration in solutions are some of them. But we have talked about that microfracturing and oil phase migrations are the two prominent one. Secondary migration is better understood and leads to the accumulation of hydrocarbon in traps, where a seal prevents them from further migration. Okay, so I will stop the presentation here and let's open the floor for any discussion that you might have. Anything that that was not clear for you? Please ask. Any question on migration? Okay, if not, I will stop the meeting and I will upload your pre-recorded video on Friday. Thank you.